Welcome to US Secret Agenda YouTube channel. The Game of Thrones between the USA and Russia began to show itself in all parts of the world, starting from the east of Europe. The process, which started with Russia's settlement on the Ukrainian border and looking for excuses for war every day, turned into a major conflict with the US forces being with Ukraine. After the annexation of Crimea and the autonomy of Donbass, Russia turned its target to Ukraine. The USA, on the other hand, stood up against Russia, which was slowly trying to recapture Eastern Europe and found a border in the Black Sea. First, the Great NATO military exercise in the Black Sea was one of the largest in history. Later, the Russian and US navies mutually harassed each other in the Black Sea region, especially around the Crimea, and the sparks of conflict between the USA and Russia began to spread. Later, this spark was carried from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean and Baltic Seas and then to the Pacific and USA coasts. The North Atlantic Alliance, on the other hand, began deploying more than 60,000 troops, and dozens of fighters and bombers, to the Russian border, after Russia sent approximately 130,000 troops to Ukraine. It is reported that the alliance did not only plan for possible attacks by Russia in the region, but also put on the table the possibility of a real attack and invasion, and advanced its preparations accordingly. In the region, which may interfere with Putin's order, the North Atlantic Alliance is taking its own precautions more and more every day. Russia is also accelerating its shipments by increasing day by not being idle in the face of the shipments made by the North Atlantic Alliance. Even if Russian President Vladimir Putin is going to fight against the North Atlantic Alliance in the USA, it seems like he wants to fight by playing all his cards and close this Game of Thrones in a way that will never be opened again. The North Atlantic Alliance, which started the week with the Neptune Strike 22 inches naval exercise under the leadership of the USA and the United Kingdom in the Mediterranean, gave a strong message by flexing its muscles against Russia. On the other hand, the Russian Navy carried the conflicts to the Crimean coast by sending 6 warships, which were under the tight control of the alliance, from the English Channel to the Black Sea. In response to this move by Russia, the American destroyer, USS Roosevelt, conducted an operation against 6 Russian warships. A few hours ago, it was reported that the American missile destroyer USS Roosevelt, which left the Rota military base in Spain, advanced to the area where 6 Russian warships belonging to the Russian Navy and intercepted it. According to preliminary data, 6 large Russian landing craft, which left the Baltic Sea a few days ago, are now heading towards the Crimea. These warships of the Russian Navy had first crossed the English Channel and arrived at the Russian port of Tartus in Syria from the Strait of Gibraltar 2 days ago. The actions of the U.S. Navy destroyer USS Roosevelt caused serious concerns on the Russian side, especially against the background of the fact that the North Atlantic Alliance and the USA began to threaten Russia with military measures, and Stoltenberg ordered the operation. The USS Roosevelt missile destroyer, which puts forward a clear weight against the show of strength of the Russians, can prevent the contrary actions of the Russian Navy in the region. Russia urgently sent 6 nuclear submarines to the Black Sea in response to this move of the USA. USS Roosevelt, DDG-80, is an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer in service with the United States Navy. She is named in honor of both President Franklin D. Roosevelt and his wife, the then First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt. She is the 30th destroyer of her class. Also, American guided missile destroyer USS Ross, armed with 90 Tomahawk cruise missiles, headed towards the Black Sea. USS Ross, DDG-71, is an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer in the United States Navy. She is the second Navy ship to be named Ross, the first Navy ship named for Medal of Honor recipient Donald K. Ross and the 21st destroyer of her class. Yesterday, the American missile destroyer USS Ross left the Rota naval base in Spain and moved into the waters of the Mediterranean Sea, from where, according to sources, the warship will head towards the Crimea, probably for operations near the Russian borders. At the moment, it is known that the U.S. Navy missile destroyer, armed with 90 Tomahawk cruise missiles, passed the Strait of Gibraltar, after which the ship will begin to move towards the eastern Mediterranean Sea, from where it will begin to move towards the Bosphorus. All this is happening against the backdrop of a very serious escalation in relations between NATO and Russia. Moreover, it is important that 2 Spanish warships are already moving towards Crimea, the El Meteoro patrol ship and the ESPS Blas de Lezo frigate, while NATO declares its readiness to send even more of its warships to the Russian borders. Earlier, the American missile destroyer USS Ross has repeatedly appeared in the waters of the Black Sea, arranging, among other things, operations, but it is constantly being monitored not only by Russian warships, but also by military aircraft. This points to the fact that Russia has trying maximum control over the situation on its borders. Meanwhile, with negotiations deadlocked, Moscow is continuing to build up its military forces for a possible invasion. Russian ships, tanks and troops on the move to Ukraine. 6 Russian landing ships capable of carrying main battle tanks, troops and other military vehicles traveled through the channel en route to the Mediterranean and heading toward Crimea in a deployment that could bolster an amphibious landing on Ukraine's southern coast if Vladimir Putin orders an attack. Ukraine's military intelligence has claimed that Russia is hiring mercenaries and supplying its proxy forces in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions with fuel, tanks and self-propelled artillery in preparation for a potential upsurge in fighting. And a large military force, including Iskander short-range ballistic missiles, elite Spetsnaz troops and anti-aircraft batteries, has arrived in Belarus from Russia's eastern military district, an extraordinary deployment that Western officials and analysts say could enable Moscow to threaten Kiev, Ukraine's capital. The new deployments have worried U.S. officials. "What concerns us is the total picture," said a senior State Department official in a briefing last week. It is the amassing of 130,000 troops along Ukraine's borders combined with moving forces into Belarus over the weekend. These numbers are beyond, of course, what we would expect with regard to a normal exercise. The new forces in Belarus, the official added, represent an increased capability for Russia to launch this attack, increased opportunity, increased avenues, increased routes. The U.S. President, Joe Biden, last week said that Putin himself may not know what he plans to do. But the results are either reckless brinkmanship or preparations for a large-scale military operation. It gradually dawned on Putin that if he stays on the track of stable and predictable, as Biden indicated, he's the designated loser, said Pavel Bayev, research professor at the Peace Research Institute Oslo and a Brookings Institution non-resident fellow. Something needed to be done. He went for this escalation quite sharply. Diplomatic efforts last week were inconclusive. The Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, called talks with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken frank and substantive. As Russia's buildup nears completion, U.S. and European countries have stepped up military support for Ukraine. The UK last week sent more than 2,000 NLAW, next-generation light anti-tank weapon, launchers and deployed about 30 troops from a new Ranger regiment as trainers. Estonia has said it will provide Javelin anti-tank missiles, while Lithuania and Latvia will send Stinger anti-aircraft missiles. In a shift, the Netherlands also said it would be ready to provide defensive weapons to Ukraine. And the US has said it will increase aid and send Mi-17 transport helicopters originally meant for use in Afghanistan to Ukraine instead. The decision to fast-track arms to Ukraine reflects an understanding that Russia could launch an attack at any moment. We know that there are plans in place to increase that force even more on very short notice, and that gives President Putin the capacity, also on very short notice, to take further aggressive action against Ukraine, Blinken said in public remarks last week. The scope of a Russian attack and its ultimate goals remain unclear. Some analysts have suggested Russia may want to formally annex the Donbas region or capture territory to connect the Russian mainland with Crimea, the Ukrainian peninsula annexed by Russia in 2014. But others see Moscow's larger aim as compelling the Ukrainian government to submit to Russia's terms, effectively re-establishing a sphere of influence in Eastern Europe. And that ambitious goal could mean that a Russian attack would have to put extraordinary pressure on the Ukrainian government. If the purpose is to compel Ukraine's leadership, then a ground invasion only makes sense if it puts Ukraine in a more untenable or threatened position. Neither a land bridge nor an operation in Odessa would likely achieve that result, but an offensive towards Kiev could, wrote Rob Lee, a former U.S. Marine and a fellow in the Foreign Policy Research Institute's Eurasia program, in an analysis. Ultimately, Russia wants to block Ukraine's entrance into NATO, stymie cooperation with Western powers and reverse Kiev's trajectory away from Moscow. To that end, it has sought to put Ukraine in a position that would stretch its defenses and threaten a potential hammer blow against Kiev. Russia has deployed more than 60 battalion tactical groups, more than a third of the military's total available force, and appears unwilling to halt its buildup on Ukraine's borders. Russian troops, along with Iskander short-range ballistic missiles, began arriving in Belarus last week after traveling across the country from Russia's Far East. The troops are arriving for joint military exercises set for mid-February and will include Russian Sukhoi Su-35 fighter jets and nearly the entire Belarusian armed forces, according to the country's leader, Alexander Lukashenko. "Don't get into a fight with us," said Lukashenko in punchy remarks on Friday. "We can't be defeated." At the same time, Russia has announced sweeping naval drills that will include every fleet in the country's navy, numbering more than 140 warships. Along with the 6 landing craft likely headed for the Mediterranean, a Russian cruiser and destroyer will also be dispatched following the exercises. NATO has also announced its own naval drills, including a U.S. aircraft carrier strike group in the Mediterranean for the next 2 weeks, meaning that the two rivals will be conducting exercises at the same time amid heightened tensions. Russia appears to be finalizing its preparations for a strike on Ukraine. But even if the attack never comes, analysts say that there may never be a return to the status quo before the Russian buildup began last year. "I think it's clear that even if a war is avoided, I don't think we're going to go back to the situation prior to April 2021, said Angela Stent, Director Emerita of the Center for Russian, East European and Eurasian Studies at Georgetown University and a non-resident senior fellow at the Brookings Institution. During a roundtable discussion, she said that the crisis could lead to the third reorganization of Euro-Atlantic security since the 1940s.